A lot of Lightning Ridge opal is really nice, but this stuff, not so sure. Dare I use the term cryptocrystalline? Sounds like kryptonite. It has nothing to do with Superman or his silly dog. Looks like they just fished this out of the disposal. Rough opal, where can I buy it? Yada yada. What does yada yada mean? There's one born every minute. When I first saw it, it reminded me of, well, remember the morning after the big Christmas party at work? The goal of this video is to help you learn the basics of the opal market and how to make a good purchase as much as is possible. I have 3 basic rules for buying rough opal. Number 1, buy untouched opal, opal that comes directly from the mine. Number 2 is to buy from somebody who will allow you to return it. Of course, with opal, you can just look at it and return it. You can't cut it or anything else, but lots of dealers allow returns, and you should ideally deal with someone who will allow you to return it. If you buy opal in person, you'll see cracks or things that might be negatives, but you might not see that if you're buying online, for example. So it's pretty important that you buy from somebody who will allow you to return it. And the third thing is to buy from somebody who is willing to bargain. I bought a parcel of opal last week. The asking price was $2,400, and I offered them $900, and they took it. So that means I offered too much. While making a recent video, I was looking at this pristine opal, and I realized that I needed to teach you guys how to buy rough opal. So I was inspired to do this rant about the characteristics of good rough opal. So here it is. This is our opal lesson of the day. I'd hope that you'd learn things by watching, and maybe you do. But here's one thing people are always asking me about rough opal. Where can I buy it? Yada yada. What does yada yada mean? Anyway, don't tell me. Let me figure it out myself. What you should buy when you're buying rough opal is exactly what this is. Untouched opal, right as it came from the mine. There are no areas that have been ground. You see the sand there, irregularity, sort of a reddish sand there. This is all natural surface. When opal fractures while being mined, it fractures like glass, and you can see that glass-like surface. This is dry. See that? This is what you should see. The only rough areas should be sand, like this mouthful of sand. It's a shark mouthful full of sand. Anyway, so this opal is untouched. It's what you want to buy. It turns out that a fair percentage of people who sell rough opal are also opal cutters. And opal cutters, well, they cut and grind. So if this came from a seller who was an opal cutter, we might see some perfectly flat areas. This may look perfectly flat, but it's not actually. It's got that sort of curved pattern. It's a conchoidal fracture pattern that happens with glass and other, well, dare I use the term cryptocrystalline? Sounds like kryptonite. It has nothing to do with Superman or his silly dog. Or was that Superboy? Anyway, you don't drop your opal. This is what you want. Untouched rough opal, just as it is. And this is a perfect example of it. So what about opal that is not untouched? What about touched opal? Well, I group touched opal, so to speak, in 2 categories. 1 is offcuts, and 2 is rubs. I'll explain. A pretty fair percentage of people who sell opal are opal cutters, and I can tell you from my experience as a cutter, I'm very curious about what's in that stone. So I immediately start cutting it, grinding it, cutting it, shaping it. But very often I get to a point where I realize that I'm not going to get what I want out of this stone. So I just set the opal aside, and it basically becomes a scrap or an offcut. So in essence, the sellers that sell offcuts are basically selling you their problem. On the other hand, they are usually priced very low, and you may just want them to practice on. So there's also a benefit of buying scraps. Let's talk about the other type of altered opal, known as opal rubs. Technically, a rub is where part or all of the surface has been rubbed off to let you see into the stone. Sometimes rubs look very much like offcuts and vice versa, and a rub just is a designation there to tell you that, hey, I've messed with this opal. You may want to buy it or you may not. Sometimes an opal cutter will take a really nice opal, rub it, and then realize that it's really too nice as it is, so I'll just sell it as a huge rub. Or, as in this case, sell it as rough opal, 7/8 of an ounce for $8,000. I'm going to go over some examples of some opal parcels, but first I wanted to let you know about a couple of other things that you need to look at when you're looking at opal online. When looking at opal online, you have to take into account other things that I need to mention. One is the size, and one is the color. They may be greatly different than they appear. This looked like a nice piece of natural opal, $50 or something like that, but there's nothing to tell us how big it is. It turns out this was only 12 millimeters or half an inch long. Not a good deal for $50. This opal looked great in one of the photos in the auction, but elsewhere there was a different photo of the same stone. Probably shows what it really looked like. This is a photo sent to me by an opal miner at Coober Pedy. It's oversaturated, but I knew the miner and I bought the parcel, and you can see the results in at least one of my videos. This is an eBay auction for very bright Ethiopian opal. Looked fantastic. Too good to believe, and it turned out to be too good to believe. Sometimes the color and size are both okay. This stone from eBay may be worth $1,700 for 2.5 ounces, but look at it. It's probably 50% sand. Okay, we're going to review some parcels of opal and figure out if they're decent parcels or not. Some of these are from my files, some are from eBay, some are from opal auctions, some from elsewhere on the internet. This parcel is dark base. They all look uniform, untouched, a good parcel. This looks like they just fished this out of the disposal. I'd like to call these offcuts, but they really don't deserve that distinction. This was listed on eBay as yellow Australian opal. First of all, there's no such thing. Second of all, it's not yellow, it's green, because it's green Madagascar common opal. And I'm not going to argue, oh, it's yellow, green, whatever. And if this disappoints you, well, you're just going to have to learn to live with disappointment. This is a fairly good parcel, different sizes. They look all about right, and they don't look altered. It's a good parcel. This is a 40-ounce parcel from Andamuka. It's selling as Andamuka solid opal, but all that white stuff there is actually matrix, so you can't call it 40 ounces. Plus there's this. This is looks like a nice parcel. All of it's about the same. The problem is that it's oversaturated. The work stopped on this particular opal when the guy realized he couldn't get past that brown dot, so he decided to pass it to somebody with more money than experience. There's one born every minute. This looks like it should be a bad parcel, but it's actually a good parcel of thin slices of pretty decent white opal. Now, believe it or not, this is actually opal. When I first saw it, it reminded me of, well, remember the morning after the big Christmas party at work? This is a parcel of Mintaby, 3 ounces. I bought this a few years ago. Very nice, all clean, good opal. This was listed as a nice parcel of Lightning Ridge opal. Well, a lot of Lightning Ridge opal is really nice, but this stuff, not so sure. This next parcel reminds me of Mardi Gras. I'm familiar with the New Orleans Mardi Gras, but it's held around the world on Fat Tuesday. Lots of celebration, lots of fun, but you know what? The next day, Someone's just got to deal with all the... Well, this parcel reminds me of that. Well, you may or may not have noticed, but there are a lot of faces in this video where they shouldn't be. So I decided to explain this phenomenon. It's referred to as pareidolia. It's the tendency for all humans to perceive a face where one does not actually exist. In humans and great apes, there's a specific zone in the brain called the fusiform gyrus where the face recognition zone is. Well, what does this do for us? Well, it lets us tell a friendly face from one that might not be as friendly. But this phenomenon of pareidolia has been noticed for thousands of years. There's a museum outside of Tokyo devoted to displaying the stone heads of would-be humans. And do turtles experience pareidolia? I don't think they care. Well, that's the end of another fun-filled episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.